The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Are the Washington Commanders playing with fire? Terry McLaurin says he's ready to lead.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Why Washington won't pay for what Terry McLaurin has already earned. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Just last weekend, my wife and I, thanks to Gametime, went to New York Yankees game. Got to go to Yankee Stadium for the first time ever. Definitely highly recommend utilizing the app because I am a customer myself. The Commanders aren't questioning Terry McLaurin's legacy. They just don't appear willing to pay for it. I think that's really kind of the bottom line here. Terry McLaurin is going to play in 2025. I believe he's going to play for the Washington Commanders, but the Commanders front office appears to be refusing to pay for past value. Terry McLaurin wants to be paid for leadership, loyalty, and durability. And don't necessarily disagree or not, necessarily see where he's coming from, but his own words speaking to media on Tuesday afternoon really just kind of highlighted that these are some of the main sticking points. When you read between the lines, pick up what Terry McLaurin is really kind of harping on with his frustrations about the team and the negotiations. It just seems like that's the message I'm picking up. One of the things, quote, when things were adverse, when there was a lot of chaos going on, I held firm, I held strong, I held my head high, and I was a leader. I'm going to continue to do that, end quote. Another quote, when you have that type of production, when you know how people value you and see you and have told you to your face, and then you see how it's progressed up until this point, that's very disappointing, end quote. Terry McLaurin also talked about the market, how it talks about the guys who are playing the caliber that he is deserving of, why he fits in that box, how he carries himself both on and off the field. Also, Terry McLaurin also said, quote, I don't want to feel like you have to beg for someone to see your worth and value. Everything in previous regimes, and now I've done everything asked of me, end quote. And ultimately, Terry McLaurin said he feels a little bit disrespected by the way this Washington Commanders front office, led, of course, by general manager Adam Peters, has kind of handled things. He says that they have to do what's best for the team. Obviously, Terry McLaurin understands that. But Terry also says, quote, I know what I bring to a team, and I feel I've proven that day in, day out. I have to stand on my worth and my value, end quote. And listen, like man to man, human to human, there's a lot of things about what Terry McLaurin is saying that I agree with. I think he stands on business. I think he's represented this organization very well during some very chaotic times and some times where it wouldn't be very easy to represent this organization very well. I think he's had a lot of room and a lot of opening to complain, to be woe is me, to be angry, and he never took advantage of them. I can remember a couple of times where he kind of got close. Like there was the one game when Eric Bieniemy was the offensive coordinator where he said, well, I got a lot of cardio in today. That was like the closest that Terry McLaurin ever got to complaining or openly criticizing or being disgruntled until Tuesday. So I think it's a very significant shift. But Adam Peters, I believe, and I went on Danny and Grant on 106.7, The Fan on Tuesday afternoon, talked about this very topic. I don't think Adam Peters is interested in paying Terry McLaurin for what he's done in the past. He's only interested in paying him for what he's going to do in the future. And part of that future includes Terry McLaurin turning 30 years old. Because remember, we're talking about an extension here. It's not impossible, but typically, like you look at the Garrett Wilson deal, right? The Garrett Wilson deal that dropped on Monday that has all kinds of guaranteed money on it and everything else is an extension. Garrett Wilson still has 2 years left on his rookie deal. That new contract, all that new money you just heard of, that starts 3 years from now. 3 seasons from now is when that contract starts. So right now it's a top 10 deal. By the time that contract actually starts being paid out, it could be a top 15 deal by that time, the way the market is kind of going, right? So Adam Peters just doesn't look to me like he's wanting to commit top money, top 10, top 5 for projected declining years. And that unfortunately is what the projections say for Terry McLaurin. More on that here in just a little bit. And I believe that Adam Peters is more than willing to let this current deal expire and decide if new money is really warranted in the next offseason. And the evidence of that is Terry McLaurin himself saying that there has been no conversation between his camp and the Washington Commanders, or at least himself and the Washington Commanders. Like, he didn't specifically say my agent hasn't talked to the team, but he did say that he hasn't heard anything from the team in over a month. And if you're Adam Peters and you're the Washington Commanders front office and you're really wanting to get an extension done with Terry McLaurin, I don't think you're going to let a whole month go by with no conversation, right? So if that is in case the situation where it's not just Terry not hearing from the front office, it's also Terry's agent not hearing from the front office, then I kind of lean towards thinking that Adam Peters is basically willing to kind of play chicken and call Terry's bluff and say, look, dude, you have a contract. You're under contract for 2025 with the Washington Commanders. Play it or don't play it. That's your decision, but you're not going to corner me into giving you something that I don't feel right giving you. And a lot of that is going to have to do with the age. It's not Terry's production, 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons, double-digit touchdowns last year. It's not his leadership. Leadership is unquestioned, and I think that you can dip into the past and look at who he's been as a leader, who he was last year as a leader. And Terry did acknowledge the age thing, okay, up front, but he also kind of dismissed the age thing, said, quote, I'm not dismissing age completely. There are data points to support that. We've got those data points. But how come it's not okay to say this may be a different case? And based on what he's proven, showing no signs of deterioration, I feel that should be acknowledged as well. End quote. He also said, quote, people make it seem like I need to start getting fitted for a walker and a cane. My game is going to mature in a great way. End quote. As someone who has had to walk with the cane, I totally get where Terry's coming from here. Terry also pointed out, very, very good point. Quote, I'm the same guy just in January was able to take a slant in the NFC Championship game and a screen for a touchdown. I don't think that changes in 6 months, especially without no major injuries. End quote. Again, all really good points made by Terry McLaurin. And I totally get where Terry McLaurin is coming from. But I think that from a front office standpoint, where Adam Peters is the sticking point to this whole thing probably is you're wanting to be paid like you're the unicorn. The problem is if we pay you like you're the unicorn and you turn out to be just like everybody else, we're going to be the ones left holding the bag. You're not going to give that money back, nor would we ask you to get, well, actually, they might ask them to get that money back. You're not going to give that money back, but you're going to ask us to give it to you up front. And again, you're asking them to commit to it in the season. You're going to turn 30, not even, and you're already going to be committed to that money. Again, this is new money we're talking about. This is money that's going to start getting paid out in 2026. When Terry is 30, we'll be turning 31 in September of 2026 season. The new money he wants today, based on previous production, based on what he's going to do as a 29-year-old, won't start getting paid until he's a almost 31-year-old. And the projected production arc, right, using True Media, we got our Cynthia Freeland on. Shout out to Cynthia Freeland of NFL.com. We did some algorithms. We did some mathing. We did some True Media data sorting. And what we came up with is a production arc. It's a projected production arc. It is not a prediction. It certainly is not set in stone. But from 2025, this year, to 2029, 2029 is Terry McLaurin's 29-year-old season. Look, he turns 30 in September. I understand that. But the way that the data gets sorted is how old are you on September 1st? Terry McLaurin will be 29. So because of that, this is his 29-year-old season. The projection for this season, 80 catches, 1,009 yards, 7.8 touchdowns, top 30 receiver. Good stuff. Age 30, 2026, 74 catches, 856 yards, 4.6 TDs, top 50 receiver. Okay, decent. Next season, 2027, 41 catches, 440 yards, 3.2 touchdowns. Now you're talking about being outside the top 50. 32, you're outside the top 50 again. And the numbers, the algorithms do say that a lot of times there's kind of a bounce back season right around 33 where Terry could come back into that top 50 range. But if we're talking about paying Terry McLaurin top 10 annual average value money now, the production arc for players entering their 29-year-old season going into the next 4 seasons after that, because if we talk about a 4-year extension, again, 29-year-old season, 2025, this is the last year on his current deal. A 4-year extension takes you into his 30, 31, 32, and 33-year-old seasons, and you see that projected production arc, and this is based off of previous wide receiver productions, guys like A.J. Green, Julio Jones, guys who were at the top of the league at one point. These are based on those types of projections, not just those guys, but just two big names that you can take away from. The sticking point here is McLaurin wants to be paid for what he has meant to this franchise. I get it. Adam Peters is only wanting to pay for what's next. I also get that. If Washington won't pay for the past, then what exactly is Terry McLaurin worth right now?
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Maybe the Cincinnati Bengals do. With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Another year, another wide receiver trade request. It wouldn't be 49ers training camp without a little bit of drama as rookies report.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Jauan Jennings looking for a new contract, making about $7 million this year. Croc going into the final year of a 2-year extension, and he wants a new deal. He wants either a new deal or a trade, per sources, according to Adam Schefter. And Jennings will report to camp, though, Croc. So I want to start with that because I think Jauan Jennings deserves to be paid more money. He was the 49ers leading wide receiver last year. Kittle was the leading receiver. Jennings, the leading wide receiver, even though he came into the year as the number 3 guy with a first-round pick. Had a really nice season, and this is a nice time for him to flex what leverage he has to try to get a new deal ahead of free agency and make more than the $7.5 million he's scheduled to make this year. But if he shows up to camp, does the request have any teeth is my big question, Croc.
Yeah, because I think out of respect, right? Like, I think this is a guy that Kyle Shanahan probably has a really good relationship with. I think Jauan Jennings exemplifies everything that Kyle Shanahan wants in his receivers. Just the way he plays. You know, we talked about when he was drafted. This was a guy that ran a 4.7, and you're not really seeing a lot of guys being drafted with running a 4.7, not being the fastest guys. But he was either number 1 or number 2 in the nation in yards after catch. It was either him or Brandon Ayuk, who was right there at the top. So this is a guy that, on top of that, is a tremendous blocker. He has the right mindset. He does all the dirty work, and he just goes out there and does his job. So I think for Kyle Shanahan, it's like, I got to get this done. And they probably do appreciate him showing up, maybe not making it more of an issue. But the fact that in the original tweet that I saw, it was like, pay me or trade me. It does make me a little surprised that he's showing up, because you're giving the team an ultimatum.
Right. Yeah. And it feels a little strong for not being, a topic that was at least put out there publicly, as far as maybe a contract disagreement between the 49ers and Jauan Jennings. And there's, clearly behind the scenes, and I believe Drew Rosenhaus is Jauan Jennings' agent. They've been doing it a long time, right? So this isn't the first time the 49ers are hearing about. They're like, oh, Jauan Jennings wants more money, a new contract? Oh, I didn't know that, right? So this has been going on. I think this is them, the last moment they possibly can, trying to jab the 49ers and poke them with the stick a little bit and be like, come on, let's do something. We're trying to get something done. You're clearly dragging your feet on this. This is our last opportunity to flex some of this leverage that we have before the season starts, trying to get their client a new deal.
Yeah, a lot of 49er fans, right when it happened, and I was in the gym, slight flex, working out, trying to get strong and look like Peacock. All right, but I was in the gym trying to get my workout on. But in between sets, you're kind of scrolling social media, and I see Adam Schefter, and I see a big picture of Jauan Jennings. I'm like, oh man, did he get arrested? Like, what happened? Like that, your mind goes to like the worst case scenarios, but then it's like, nah, he's requesting the trade. And my initial reaction was, oh, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Talked about this with Brandon Ayuk. And Brandon Ayuk could have played on his 5th-year option, right? But the big thing with the 49ers, just the way they do things with their pass catchers, you don't quite know from year to year what the production is going to be for a receiver. So even Brandon Ayuk, the year before the big contract, right? The year before he had the all-pro season, he had like more targets or something like that, like 2 more targets. And his production as far as catches wasn't crazier, but his yards per catch went up drastically. Is he going to continue to get targeted the way that he was or have that kind of production again? He could revert back to what he had the year before, which was barely 1,000. Now I'm not as valuable to the 49ers or other teams from a financial standpoint, or I'm not going to get as much money as I potentially could get. So when I look at Jauan Jennings, and he had this season where he got almost 1,000 yards, it's like, oh, I got to cash in on what I am, because I don't know this year if I'm going to have that kind of season again. We'd assume like, oh, well, Jauan Jennings showed his worth. He's a really good receiver. Yeah, you could say all those things, but when Ayuk comes back, you're assuming he's going to be in the mix. He's going to take some balls from him. Ricky Pearsall, you're assuming he takes the next steps. He's more involved. Christian McCaffrey, he's back. What he's going to do, he's going to take some balls away from Jauan Jennings, some targets away from Jauan Jennings. George Kittle, obviously, he's going to get his, and they played well together last season. I say all that to say his 77 catches, I believe he had for almost 1,000 yards last season, going to go from 77 to 45 real quick. And if he has 45 receptions, now how much am I worth on the open market? So he could play out this 7-year contract and say, you know what? I'm potentially going to ball out again, get 1,000 yards, and I'm going to hit free agency and make a bunch of money. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think he thinks that's going to happen. I don't think his agent thinks that's going to happen. So he has to cash in right now, pay me or trade me somewhere where maybe they'll utilize me and get me around 1,000 yards. And now I can cash in and get a better contract.
Well, it's a great point about production. Offhand, do you know how many catches and yards Jauan Jennings had the year before in 2023? When everybody ahead of him,
like 25 or something.
19 catches for 265 yards and a touchdown. And he was the 5th leading receiver on the team. Like, the Niners don't have a huge high volume passing game. And I believe it was 12 of those 19 catches went for first downs, right? Because he is third in Jauan. But he was the 5th leading receiver. All the targets went from 75 catches for Ayuk, 65 for Kittle, 60 for Debo, 67 for Christian McCaffrey. And then all the way down to 19 catches for Jauan Jennings is the 5th leading receiver on the team.
That's
in 2023, right? But there's no Brandon Ayuk to start the season. But you do have a healthy Kittle and you have a healthy Christian McCaffrey. But again, does he become the leading wide receiver on the team for most of the year until Brandon Ayuk comes back? He's battling with Ricky Pearsall, but he'll be in the starting lineup. So I would assume that the production looks more like last year, at least to start. How does the year end for Jauan Jennings? That becomes the question. And then there's injury questions. And so you do want to strike while the iron's hot, because he's not going to have a 19 catch season this year. But man, like you mentioned, that could become 45 or even 60 would be a dip from what he did last year. He was only 1 catch shy of George Kittle for leading the team in 2024.
The crazy thing about last season was his most productive game. Like, Brandon Ayuk was out there. Now, Ricky Pearsall wasn't, but he had 11 catches for 175 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Rams in a loss. Crazy loss, right? Like, where he was super productive. Outside of that, he actually had more double-digit targets. And I have to kind of fact check this. But if I'm looking at this correctly, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double-digit target games last season for him. Brandon Ayuk in his all-pro season, I think, had 1. Let me see. Let me go back to. So, and if that holds true, I'm looking at it right now. Brandon Ayuk in his all-pro season had 1 double-digit target game. In that double-digit target game, he had 10 targets. So he was right there on the cusp. Where Jauan Jennings last season had 5. Who's to say they don't revert back to? And now you just don't get those kind of opportunities. And the big part of that is having guys like Christian McCaffrey on the field, Brandon Ayuk eventually on the field, Ricky Pearsall taking that next leap. I gotta cash in if I'm him, because I'm not gonna get these kind of opportunities again.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right in the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
The Jets give Sauce Gardner a record-setting contract extension, and it's a bargain.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
Well, another day, another contract extension for the New York Jets. One day after the team agreed to terms on a long-term deal with wide receiver Garrett Wilson, the Jets announced another contract extension for a player they drafted in the top 10 in the 2022 NFL Draft. Sauce Gardner, the superstar corner, receives a record-setting deal. It is a 4-year contract worth $120.4 million. $60 million of that is guaranteed. On today's show, we're going to break down this new contract for a star player. I'm going to talk about the ways this shows that the Jets will have better leadership going forward. I'm going to talk about why this record-setting deal is a bargain. That might sound like a contradiction, but it's not. But let's begin by talking about the value Sauce Gardner brings to the New York Jets. Sauce Gardner has been one of the best players in football since he set foot on the field. He is a guy who has made first-team All-Pro at corner in 2 of his 3 NFL seasons. And that's very impressive. He made it year 1. He made it year 2. Year 3, he stepped back a little bit. It wasn't quite as impressive as his first 2 years. But here's the thing. A bad season by Sauce Gardner's standards is a good season for practically everybody else. Sauce Gardner was still an upper echelon cover guy. Look, is his game perfect? Nobody's game is perfect. He's not a great tackler in space. Lots of corners aren't great tacklers in space. He doesn't have great hands, so his interception numbers may never be great because he drops some interceptions. But what he does is he erases the other team's best receiver. He erases whoever he's up against one-on-one. That is a critical thing to have on your football team. And it's not something a lot of teams have. Sauce Gardner can shut down the other team's best receiver. And that is going to be more critical with Aaron Glenn than it was even under Robert Saleh. When Robert Saleh ran the defense, corner was important, especially on third down plays, especially on passing down plays, because on third down, Robert Saleh, along with Jeff Ulbrich, they like to mix things up. They'd throw a blitz at you on third down, but on the early downs, they were about playing zone coverage. They were about rushing 4 guys. And when you rush 4 guys, that means you're dropping 7 into coverage. Other teams can only send out 5 receivers. So you got a 7-on-5. The numbers are in your favor. When you blitz, as Aaron Glenn will do frequently, he'll do it on early downs. He'll do it on third down. The calculus changes because you're sending a 5th guy at the quarterback. So that means you only have 6 guys in the back of the defense. And usually one of the 6 is going to be a guy who's kind of like the last line of defense. He's going to be usually we call it the free safety or the single high safety. There's going to be one guy at the back of the defense who's just going to be like the last line of defense. If someone blows a tackle, he's going to be there. So that means really it's 5-on-5. That means you got to play man to man. And I would almost compare this to the change when Eric Mangini left and Rex Ryan came in. Because Rex Ryan, when he came in, he inherited another star corner, Darrelle Revis. Now, there's a bit of mythology around Rex and Revis from the standpoint that people act like Revis wasn't a great player before 2009. And that's not the case. Darrelle Revis made the Pro Bowl in 2008. Near the end of the 2008 season, it became clear that he was a lockdown corner. But what I would say is that Rex Ryan's defense got the most out of Darrelle Revis' skill set. Because what Rex Ryan would do is he would send Darrelle Revis, if the other team had an elite receiver, Darrelle Revis would follow that guy around the field. He'd go left if the number 1 receiver went left. He'd go right if the number 1 receiver went right. In 2009, Darrelle Revis matched up with the other team's number 1 receiver 2/3 of the time, 66% of the time. And even that understates how significant Darrelle Revis was at following the other team's best receiver around the field. Because if Rex Ryan felt like the other team's best receiver wasn't a star, then they just put Revis on one side. Then they wouldn't have Revis follow the other. So it was only against the elite receivers where Revis drew those matchups, where he was just on the other team's number one receiver nonstop. And that's like when the Jets went up against Andre Johnson, great receiver with the Houston Texans, or Randy Moss, the Hall of Famer, one of the top 5 receivers to ever play the game with the New England Patriots, or the great Steve Smith with the Carolina Panthers that year. Those were the types of receivers Revis drew one-on-one for the entire game. And when they were up against an elite receiver, Revis would follow them around the field and erase them. And it went deeper than that because Rex Ryan felt that, Revis could handle anybody one-on-one. That meant they could double team the other team's number 2 guy. On the other side of the field, the Jets had Lito Shepherd in 2009. Lito Shepherd had a good career, made a couple Pro Bowls with the Philadelphia Eagles, but by 2009, he was just a guy who was okay. But because the Jets could handle the other team's number 1 receiver one-on-one, that meant, again, they could put double team on the guy Lito Shepherd was covering. Or the other thing they could do was they could play what's known as combo coverage. Combo coverage means that you're playing part man, part zone. The part that was man was Revis was taking the other team's number 1 receiver one-on-one. The part that was zone was the Jets would just load the other side of the field with defenders. Because Revis could handle, if say it was on the right side of the formation, because Revis had the right side locked down, they just stuck all the defenders on the left side of the field and clogged the passing lanes for the quarterbacks. You saw this manifest itself not just in 2009, but throughout Darrelle Revis's career with the New York Jets. In 2010, the Jets had a massive playoff upset in Foxborough against the New England Patriots. And what the Jets did that day, because the Patriots were a team with a lot of dynamic players in the middle of the field. They had Wes Welker at the slot receiver spot. This was early in Rob Gronkowski's career. A lot of the Patriots playmakers were in the middle of the field. What the Jets did that day was they just had Darrelle Revis and Antonio Cromartie line up one-on-one on the outside and gave them no help against guys like Deion Branch. And because Revis and Cromartie could take those guys out one-on-one on the outside with no help, they put all the help in the middle of the field. Again, clogged the passing lanes for Tom Brady and helped the Jets score a massive playoff upset against the Patriots team that at that point looked unbeatable, and the Jets were able to beat them. This is the type of impact Sauce Gardner could have for the New York Jets defense going forward. He was a great player under Robert Saleh. Nobody's going to dispute that Sauce Gardner was anything other than a stellar player under the previous Jets coaching staff. Again, the first 2 years he set foot on the field, he was named first team All-Pro. That's not Pro Bowl. Pro Bowl means you're like one of the top, 6, 7, 8 corners in the league. First team All-Pro means that you're one of the top 2 corners in the league. Sauce Gardner was that his first 2 years in the league. And year 3, even though he wasn't as good, and look, there were lots of Jets who struggled last year. Jets team last year was very dysfunctional in a lot of ways. Even though that was a down year for Sauce Gardner, by the standards of virtually any other corner, it was an excellent season. But I don't think Robert Saleh ever truly used Sauce Gardner's skill set to maximize it, because Robert Saleh, at his heart, even though on late downs, even though on passing downs, 3rd and long, he would blitz, he was in his heart a zone coach. And asking Sauce Gardner to defend a zone, really a zone is just a portion of the field. Asking Sauce Gardner to defend a portion of the field is not truly maximizing Sauce Gardner's skill set. A defense where you blitz, where you ask your corner to hold up one-on-one against the elite receivers in the league, against the Jamar Chases of the world. That's a tremendous skill set to have. There aren't many teams that have it. The Jets have it with Sauce Gardner, and that's what makes this extension a no-brainer.